Hey everyone, welcome back to our Histo PH channel, where forgotten Filipino history finally comes alive. In this episode, today, we uncover the hidden kingdoms that existed before Spain ever set foot on our shores, before the Spanish ships ever touched our shores, before the cross was planted in our soil. There was already a world, rich, powerful, and deeply Filipino. This is the story they rarely teach. The story of the hidden kingdoms that existed long before Spain claimed discovery. A story buried under centuries of colonization, silence, and lies. Long before Magellan set sail, our islands were alive with trade, diplomacy, and invention. Across what we now call the Philippines, there were rulers, rajas, lakans, datus, who commanded fleets, collected tribute, and upheld laws. The kingdom of Tondo, for instance, was not a village. It was a bustling maritime empire along the Pasig River, its leaders rich in gold and power. Foreign traders, Chinese, Malays, even Arabs, sailed into its ports to exchange silk and porcelain for our native treasures. Tondo's gold was so pure that foreign records called it the City of Shining Rivers. To the south stood the Rajanate of Butuan, a kingdom famous for its golden boats and skilled navigators. In 1001 CE, the ruler of Butuan sent a diplomatic mission to the Song dynasty in China. That means over 400 years before the Spaniards came, Butuan already had international relations. Think about that. A Filipino kingdom sending ambassadors abroad while Europe was still in the Dark Ages. Then there was the Sultanate of Sulu, a powerhouse of culture, religion, and trade. Its influence reached as far as Borneo and the Malay world. The Tausug warriors were feared across the seas, their discipline unmatched, their culture rich with poetry and honor. If you're amazed by our ancestors' kingdoms, hit that like button, drop a comment about your favorite fact, and subscribe to join the Histo PH family. In Cebu, the Rajanate of Humabon governed a thriving port where merchants from Siam, India, and China bartered spices, metals, and fabrics. These kingdoms didn't just survive, they thrived. They had writing systems, social laws, trade networks, and technologies that proved one thing: we were never a primitive people waiting to be civilized. Our ancestors wrote in Baybayin, a pre-colonial script that flowed like poetry. Their words were etched on bamboo, leaves, and copper. The Laguna copperplate inscription, dated to 900 CE, is proof, a legal document about debt, taxes, and freedom, written in a mixture of Sanskrit, Malay, and Old Tagalog. It's not just an artifact, it's evidence that early Filipinos had a legal system, literacy, and governance. We had art, music, and intricate spiritual beliefs. The Babaylans, women and men who served as healers, mystics, and leaders, guided their communities with wisdom rooted in nature and spirit. They understood the land, the tides, the stars. They kept the balance between the seen and unseen. Gold adorned our ancestors, not as vanity, but as symbol of power and divine connection. The Golden Tara of Agusan, a statue of a goddess found buried in Mindanao, reflects the influence of Hindu and Buddhist beliefs. It tells us that our ancestors were part of the same spiritual and cultural currents that shaped Southeast Asia, not isolated tribes, but participants in a grand human story. Yet when the Spanish arrived in 1521, they saw only what they wanted to see: a land to conquer, souls to convert, and kingdoms to erase. They burned our records, called our leaders chieftains, and labeled our civilizations as barangays. But these weren't mere villages. They were sovereign nations, each with its own structure, economy, and identity. Imagine if the kingdom of Tondo had survived intact, if Butuan's Maritime might continue to expand, if Sulu's influence spread unchallenged. The map of Asia might have included a united Maharlika Empire. But history took another path, one written by conquerors. Still, traces of that lost world remain. The gold ornaments found in Surigao, the ancient barangay boats of Butuan, the royal genealogies of Sulu, they whisper of a time when Filipinos were masters of their fate. Our ancestors were engineers who built rice terraces so perfect that they've lasted over 2,000 years. They were sailors who could navigate by stars and currents without compasses. They were artists who painted their bodies and wove stories into cloth. Every part of their world was alive and deeply spiritual. When you look at old maps from China and Arabia, you'll see our islands named long before Spain arrived: Mai, Luzones, Sulu, Butuan. These weren't inventions of colonizers. They were our names, our identities. The Philippines is a colonial label, but before that, we already had names that sang with meaning. The story of pre-colonial Philippines isn't just history, it's proof of who we truly are. Innovators, diplomats, warriors, poets, and dreamers. Every time you hear someone say, "We were nothing before Spain," remember Tondo's gold, Butuan's boats, and Baybane's flowing script. Remember that our ancestors didn't need saving. They were already free. They had their own gods, Bathala, Canlaon, Apo Sandawa, deities that reflected their love for the land, the sea, and the sky. They practiced balance, respect, and unity. Women held power as priestesses and rulers. Slavery existed, yes, but freedom was attainable. One could buy back their liberty, rise through merit, and earn honor through bravery. Spain may have conquered the islands, but it never killed the spirit. That same spirit fueled every revolution, every rebellion, every song of freedom that followed. So when we talk about the hidden kingdoms before Spain, we're not just remembering ruins, we're uncovering identity. The story of the Filipino didn't start with conquest. It started with greatness. The next time you walk along the Pasig River, imagine the ships of Tondo gliding by, flags fluttering, drums beating. When you see the mountains of Mindanao, imagine the golden Tara glinting under the sun. When you hear the waves crash on the shores of Butuan, listen. Maybe you'll hear the echoes of the barangay, the ancient boats of our ancestors, whispering, "We were never lost." And now, it's our turn to tell their story, loudly, proudly, and without shame. Because the world must know. Before the Spanish, there was already a Philippines, a land of kingdoms, culture, and glory. Our history didn't begin with colonization. It began with civilization. And that civilization was ours. Our ancestors' stories don't end here. Smash that like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to join the Histo PH family for the next epic chapter.